Oh, this is hilarious. What a way to start. The Congressional Black Caucus goes down to La Habana, and they end up meeting with Fidel Castro. And we learn that Fidel Castro wants Obama to succeed. Yes! The island dictator, Fidel Castro, who basically runs a gigantic sugar and tobacco plantation. If you want to know what Cuba is, it is nothing but a population being held hostage on a sugar and tobacco plantation. And the Congressional Black Caucus goes down there heaping praise upon Fidel Castro, says that we need to bring that business model to America. We need to bring sugar and tobacco plantations back to the United States as a business model, according to the Congressional Black Caucus. Let's listen to some sound bites. Last night, during a Capitol Hill press conference, the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, held a press conference about their trip to Cuba. Here is Representative Bobby Rush, Democrat, Illinois.
He was a down-to-earth, kind man who I thought resembled someone who I would say is as close as a neighbor. He had a very modest home, and we were met at the front door by his lovely wife. So it was almost like visiting an old friend when we visited with him. He wanted to know more about Dr. King. I told President Castro that in my household, he is known as the ultimate survivor.
What? He's the ultimate survivor against what? Us. That's right, the evil United States. The evil United States has targeted Fidel Castro. He is an angel. Why, he has successfully stood up to the bigots and the racists that have led the United States all of these years. He just lives in a modest home. His wife answered the door. Why, we felt like we were right at home. Lives in a modest home. He probably has some little guest cottage somewhere on the presidential grounds that he moved into for this meeting. You got to think Castro just laughs himself silly when these guys show up. He's got them wrapped around his little finger. He wanted to know about Dr. King. Fidel Castro wanted to know more about doctors. He could play these guys like a Stradivarius. Up next is Representative Laura Richardson, who is a Democrat from California.
What really was amazing to me is he leaned in, he looked directly into our eyes, quite aware of what was happening, and said to us, how can we help? How can we help President Obama? He talked about the fact that he had watched the campaign. You know, for people who seem to think that in Cuba, people don't have shoes, they don't have jobs, they don't have ice cream. I mean, these people are living and working and participating as many. In fact, some were even in a better situation than in some portions of my district.
Cuba are better off than some people in your district. You realize what an insane thing that is to say, even if it were true how insane it is. It's her district. She's a Democrat. All of her voters are Democrat. They've been voting Democrat for all their lives. They've been expecting all these goodies to come to their district from Washington to lift them out of this so-called squalor. And she takes pride in saying that people at Cuba, some of them she saw have it better off than people in her own district. We got more on this, but I got to take a brief time out. The real star of this show is Barbara Lee, who is from Oakland. She's a true, I mean, you're looking here at a blithering idiot, a profound, supreme leftist, whatever you want to call them. Barbara Lee is up next with two soundbites. Stay with us, folks. From Getting to Cuba, here's Barbara Lee. Last night on Wolf Blitzer's show on CNN, he asked her, how did Castro look? How did he seem to you?
He seemed very energetic. He was engaging. We met at his house, which is a house of very modest means. His wife was there. His son was taking photographs of us. And it was a very moving meeting in a sense because he was taking notes. He was very inquisitive. He asked us to send more information about Dr. King because he reveres Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and we said we would try to get more books and tapes to send down.
how are we going to get them there? We got this embargo. I guess travel and money is going to be lifted. So here we one more about Dr. King. You know, Dr. King, I have to think Dr. King would just be... Fidel Castro's not what Dr. King had in mind. Fidel Castro and that kind of tyrannical rule is not what Dr. King had in mind. Dr. King, I would think, would be embarrassed as all hell to know that a communist dictator runs a slave plantation as one of his idols or heroes. Do you have a message for Fidel Castro and from the Obama administration? Did you have one for him?
We did not have a message for any Cuban official from the Obama administration. We visited Cuba as members of Congress on an official delegation to look at what possibilities exist to come back to recommend to President Obama and to our Speaker Pelosi and to our leadership and to the Secretary of State why we believe normal relations between the United States and Cuba should move forward. It's time to talk to Cuba. We want to see these discussions take place with no preconditions.
This is, that's fine and dandy. I don't, the embargo, some say it hadn't worked, some say it did. It's the notion that United States members of Congress hero worship a totalitarian dictator. So obviously a totalitarian dictator. But you shouldn't be surprised because they had the same sort of lionization, not the CBC, but just Democrats in general, for any Soviet leader that came down the pike. All right, we'll be back, folks. Sit tight. And I remembered this name, and we dug deep into our archives. And this is a story from the Daily Breeze in California from May 21st of 2008. Representative Laura Richardson lost her Sacramento home in a foreclosure auction 2 weeks ago, left behind nearly $9,000 in property taxes. A year ago, the story was reported. She's a Democrat from Long Beach, California. She had a home in the Sacramento area. She appears to have made only a few payments on the house, which she bought in January of 2007 for $535,000. After buying the house, she hardly had time to live in it. 3 months later, Representative Juanita Millender McDonald died, and Richardson, then a freshman member of the state assembly, launched a campaign to replace her in Congress. Well, no wonder, because I'll bet Castro does not foreclose on people in Cuba. She got foreclosed on. She lost her house. Well, there's no private property in Cuba, so you can't get foreclosed on. And no wonder she thinks her constituents have it worse. We'll be back. Much more straight ahead. We'll go to your phone calls after this. Stay with us.